Welcome, and thank you for joining us for our town hall, The Path to Justice Runs Through Equity, Ending Anti-Black Racism in Los Angeles, presented by the Committee for Greater LA and the Black Experience Action Team. Chaired by April Verrett, President of SEIU 2015, and in partnership with USC, UCLA, and our over 35 member Black Experience Action Team, we released our report on August 20th, The Path to Justice Runs Through Equity, Ending Anti-Black Racism in Los Angeles, as a love letter, roadmap, and call to action for government, philanthropy, business, nonprofits, and community members to build a future where all Black Angelenos and people in the region have the necessary tools, support, and resources to flourish in a future where all Angelenos prosper together by relentlessly centering equity. We'd like to thank our generous partners and supporters who made this work possible. We invite you to learn more about the Committee for Greater LA and the Black Experience Action Team, read our report, and take the pledge to invest in Black LA.
Thank you, Kamina. I am Pastor Eddie Anderson of McCarty Memorial Church, as well as a member of the Black Experience Action Team. And I will be serving as your moderator today. We thank you for joining us today. We know you could have been anywhere else, but you decided to choose equity and lean in a little bit on today. And as you lean in, we got some wonderful panelists with us on today. And so I'm going to just call their names. You'll meet them as we go throughout this, but I want to call their names out so you'll know who you're talking to today. And I want you to show them some love, right? This is the, we're talking about equity in Black LA. So we got to show some love. We in the virtual, I'm going to call you my virtual church on today. And so we have Dr. Ange-Marie Hancock Alfaro. She is the chair of political science and international relations at USC. She was one of our academic scholars for the Black Experience Action Team. So give her a virtual round of applause and some likes and whatever else you'd like to do in the chat. We also have Dr. David Turner. Dr. David Turner, his brother got him a PhD. He is the manager of Brother Son Sales at Intercity Struggle. Let's give his brother some snaps as well. We have my dear friend, and when y'all hear her speak, you'll know exactly what the heart of the matter is. Sister Reba Stevens is here. She's a member, along with me, of the ad hoc committee on Black people experiencing homelessness or houselessness. And she is going to give us a great insights as well. And last but not least, rounding out is our brother Emmanuel and brother Karunwi. Sorry if I butchered your last name, my brother. You know, it's not charged to my head, not to my heart. And he is a student and youth activist with SJLI out in Inglewood. And so we're going to ask some questions today around this No Going Back Black LA report. And I will invite you all to lean in. Hopefully we can move and you'll learn something about equity and justice and can join us in this fight. Remember the hashtag is Invest in Black LA or Invest Black. And so we want you to put those hashtags out there as well. So to begin, I think we're going to come to you, Ange-Marie, and just ask you, where did the initial idea for this report come from?
So thank you, Pastor Eddie. It's an honor to be on this panel with you. And thank you for all your work that you've been doing, both on this and just in general. We came up with the idea for doing the report after the successful publication and launch of a very comprehensive report done about a year ago called No Going Back LA. And one of the things that that committee kind of found when they did their research was there's no way that we should go back to what LA looked like pre-COVID, because one of the things we needed to fix was anti-Black racism. And so the idea for the report really came out of this commitment that if we are not going to go back to the bad old days of pre-COVID, we need to make sure that we resolve anti-Black racism. And so April Verrett, the fearless chair of the Black Experience Action Team, came up with the idea that, again, we want to have a report that really doesn't just talk about how things are not so good or things that are bad, although we don't avoid the truth, but we also want to think about the future.
Beautiful. So you said we're not going back, and I was in the room when we was doing this report, and that was the sense, right? It was like people like want to get back to normal. We're like normal wasn't good for us in the first place. So we brought a lot of folks together to really lean in. And so David, can you tell us just a little bit about how that worked out? What was the importance of cross-sector collaboration within the Experience Action Team to create a report just like this?
Absolutely, absolutely. So first of all, thank you so much, Pastor Eddie, and thank you so much to the Black Experience Action Team, for this amazing work, right? So I'd like to start off with a quote from Audre Lorde, right? And this quote goes, "There is no such thing as a single issue struggle because we do not live single issue lives," right? And Black feminists throughout the United States and throughout history, I think more generally, right, have posed this question to us as we begin to think about what are some of the ways that we move towards freedom, right? And especially right here in Black Los Angeles, there are so many different issues that impact the Black community, whether we're talking about houselessness, whether we're talking about mass incarceration, whether we're talking about the education system. So with that being said, we realized that we had to bring people to the table so that way we were effectively able to work to provide a plan for these issues, right? So there were 35 different leaders, from community organizations, government, philanthropy, business, the business community, scholars, right? People who were able to elevate the voices, people who were able to elevate the issues that Black folks were experiencing right here in Los Angeles, as well as, provide input for the final report. So with this being said, right, like I think there were two key points to this. One is that, one of the things about, doing social justice related work, racial justice related work in LA is that you're going to run into people, right? And I think it was a beautiful thing for us to, all of us, right, to be working together on something that was unapologetically Black. And that I think was beautiful. Second, the Black experience in Los Angeles is not a monolith, right? So we have to understand, right, like what some of these issues look like and how they affect certain segments of the community. For example, if we're talking about the issues that impact Black immigrants, right? Or if we're talking about the issues that impact Black girls and young women, or the issues that impact Black boys and young men, right? The key thing, the key unifier, right, like, is that we're Black. However, we experience Blackness differently. So it's important for us, right, to understand these different issues, understand how we can work together, not only to address these issues, but also, right, how we can collaborate post this report so that way we can ensure that Black folks get what they deserve, right, that Black folks get what they need here in Los Angeles.
Beautiful. So there's a lot of ingredients in this report that make sure that, Black folks are not a monolith. And I can't stress that enough. Sometimes people be like, oh, Black LA, where is that? And it's like, oh, y'all want this one thing. But this report really shows that we're not a monolith. So Emmanuel, I'm going to come to you. It was Ella Baker who says, give light and the people will find their way. And then Aretha, go see that movie Respect, said, you're young, gifted, and Black. And then Nipsey said, hustle and motivate. So can you let me know, how are the young people in LA leading the way in ending anti-Black racism? How are the youth activists moving this conversation for equity forward?
For me, my personal experience, people like my age, a lot of young activists, the way that we've been doing it is even using the internet to our advantage. Like we're growing up in the area where the internet is such a big thing and it's such a thing that's influenced a lot of people's lives in different ways. And so with my generation, having the internet as a tool, we've been allowed to educate ourselves and learn different information, to spread information across like different platforms and different areas. Like I know while we were in quarantine, we weren't allowed to like be in person a lot. We weren't really allowed to interact like you usually would. But the movement didn't stop because we were in a pandemic. Because people my age and like people just like who knew how to use technology, they were able to get information out. They're able to organize different events and different things just because they knew how to use technology to their benefit and knew how to get the word out there, even without being in person and having to like interact in person. So that's how me and like my generation were doing. Like even that we're on Zoom right now talking about this experience and this report and things like that. And that's technology. This is how my generation has been leading the way, has been doing things to fight racism. And the way that we've been changing the conversation is we've really been trying to make it not a conversation that is only like adult oriented and adult led. It's more like it's everyone who's affected it, not just, oh, you're a teenager, you haven't done this hasn't happened enough to yet, you don't have enough experience. It's more like, hey, we have our own thoughts, our own actions, we have our own like things going on. It's not that we're just off to the sideline. These problems affect us too. So the way that we're changing it is we're interacting with these adults. We're interacting with people on different levels, from different backgrounds, from different ages and stuff. And we're seeing everyone as equal. It's not that, oh, you're too young to understand this, or, oh, you're not experienced to understand this. It's more like everyone has their own valued experience and everyone is welcome to come and bring it and talk about it and their experiences are seen as equal instead of just, oh, one is more experienced, one is less. So I think that's how we're really changing the conversation around equity. I'm sorry, I didn't add that little part. That's my sorry.
You're good, my brother. You're good because you know what you're saying. What I'm hearing you say is, that everyone has their own unique experience, and then racism does not discriminate depending on your age, right? If you've been kissed by the sun, these issues are affecting you as well. That's why we can use technology, which I want you to use technology right now if you're watching this, and just put a hashtag on it. Put hashtag invest in Black LA. Take the No Going Back pledge. Follow the Twitter, Instagram, and tell us your experience, because I think experience will help us move this report forward. So there's not just living on a shelf, but it's living out in the lives of everyday Black Angelenos. And so that experience is invaluable. And so Reba, could you tell us just, what is the importance of how lived experience can affect change in Los Angeles?
Wow. Well, first, let me acknowledge Emmanuel and his powerful statement and the good works which he's doing, because, it really is about us. There is no big I and little U's. It's about each one, reach one, teach one, and embrace. And so I admire you so much for that. Thank you again. So when I think about people such as myself with lived expertise, it's really about ensuring that we have a seat at every table. And I mean every table. There is truly no way for systems to change and to meet the essential needs of those of us in our community. And it could be where it's homelessness, substance use disorder, mental health, coming out of jails, out the voices of those of us shaping the system. Because we know all too well what that experience actually looks like, feels like, smells like, and tastes like. And so it is critical that as we are moving into this new world, right? With all of the good works that's happening here, that we are allowing us to have that seat. We want a slice of the power. I didn't say a piece of pie. We want a slice of the power. We want to be able to help shape the policies, be at the table around the design of what is necessary. And then it's also important to recognize that one size doesn't fit all, that we all come from different places. I always say that, we all came in on different different boats, but we ended up on the same shore. So we all come with something unique, and it's really about embracing the uniqueness, understanding the uniqueness, and having people that look like us be in the position and actually to support and assist in shaping change. So I'd like to quote one of my very, very favorites. And Kendi says, the only way to undo racism is to consistently identify and describe it, and then dismantle it. It is time to be dismantled.
Thank you. Thank you for that, Reba. And really highlighting for us that, Liz's experience, looks at the table and says, this is not working, and as a person of faith, I will advise you if the table's not working, the one I follow called Jesus flips over the tables, you know what I'm saying? It says, we got to change this up. And so this is what equity is doing, right? Equity is saying, as Reba says, we don't want a slice of the pie, we want a slice of the power. We want to add some equity flavor to this power and make sure everybody gets what they need. And one way that we do that is through policy. Everyone's always like, all right, so you got a report, how's it show up? And so policies. And so Ange-Marie, what are examples of some countywide policies proposed in the report? And then how does this help philanthropy and business think about how they should be moving and adding flavor to this equity that we're trying to get in the county?
So thank you, Pastor Eddie. Sometimes I wake up and is it a flip the tables kind of day? I know the Lord will tell me, but the thing I wanted to talk most about that we were really excited about in the report is this idea that we have 5 different communal policies that we think will move the needle on most, if not all, of the issues that we cover. So we cover 7 different issues in the report. If you haven't read it, please check it out. But what we found was that these 5 policies would actually help us get and move the needle and make progress on all 7 of the issues, right? So I'm going to talk about 2. One is something you've probably heard about pretty recently, universal basic income. So when you think about universal basic income, yes, we can absolutely pass something like that. And that would not just move the needle on whether or not people have, income to pay their rent, right? Or income to pay their mortgage, right? So that's one that we might think about as being a normal kind of outcome. But it would also move the needle on physical well-being and mental wellness. Why? Because we know that anxiety about where you're going to rest your head every night is one of the number 1 stressors, right, that people can have if you're either worried you're going to get evicted or you already have been evicted and you don't have a regular place to stay. All of those things are tremendous stressors on the body. And so we actually look at universal basic income as one policy. Second policy that I'll talk about is one that, again, can take place at the county level, which is culturally competent care in all of our services. And so, again, this affects things like education, right? We learned as part of the Black Experience Action Team that Black children are diagnosed at 2 to 3 years later as special needs versus white children, which means that they are not getting the services they deserve, that they have a right to, until they are 2 to 3 years older than the average white child. And so when we think about that, we have to think about how having that culturally competent care might have had a positive impact on recognizing those behaviors, right? So who are those providers? Who are those people who can actually identify what's going on? And so that's one area. But then also in terms of culturally competent care with regard to housing and people who are experiencing homelessness, knowing that when you are actually administering, and I learned this from the great Miss Reba, when you are actually administering the triage tool and talking with people who are experiencing homelessness, how are you thinking about how they are talking to you? How are you building trust so that they will actually give you answers that can meaningfully help them, as opposed to not trusting you first? And so culturally competent care weaves through housing and homelessness. It weaves through education and youth development. It weaves through the ways in which we can talk about virtually any part of physical wellness and mental well-being and environmentally healthy and safe neighborhoods as well. So when we think about those county policies, we can also think about whether or not we should just wait on the county to do it, or are we going to need to actually move the county to do it? So there's waiting, which is more passive. Then there's the more active, getting the county to actually do it. And so when we think about that, we can talk about the ways that philanthropy and business in each of their lanes, right, becomes the place where they can invest in innovation. We know that there are innovative approaches that we talk about in the report to making sure that our kids are getting diagnosed properly, that making sure that the physical wellness and mental well-being is wrapped into how we're actually engaging with people who are experiencing houselessness, to make sure that they are getting what they actually need. So again, those are the two: universal basic income and also culturally competent care and services across the different spectra. And I'm going to leave it to you to read the report and learn about the other three.
Wonderful. Thank you. Dr. Ange-Marie is dropping some truth bombs. She said universal basic income. You know what that sounds like to me? Invest in Black LA. Hashtag invest in Black LA. Go to the website, blackexperience.nogoingback.la, and put your money where your heart is. I know where your heart is, but your heart is around equity. I know that's why you're watching this video. That's why you're part of this town hall. So let's put your money where your heart is, because you know we have enough for everyone. We have enough for everyone. So David, I'm going to come to you and just ask you, building on this, investing in these two, culturally competent care and universal basic income. How does this report acknowledge some of the work that's already going on? Because some of this is already happening already, right? And so how does this report acknowledge the tremendous work of Black-led organizations currently creating and operating models for Black resiliency in LA that's already getting some of this going, not taking that passive weight, but it's actually realizing it's a everyone in type of sport?
Absolutely, absolutely. Well, so first of all, I definitely want to, I think, underscore, right, like just some of the conversations that we had in, as members of the Black Experience Action Team. There's one in particular, right, that I'll never forget, right, which was the sister of Ryan Twyman, Chiquita Twyman, right, spoke to us about what happened, right, with Ryan and how he was killed by the LA County sheriffs, right. And in that particular conversation, right, as somber as it was, I think what was important, right, was understanding not only the resiliency of her, but also to the charge for why not only we need to uplift his name, but the names of other people who have been harmed by police and state violence, right? By uplifting those, right, who have continued, right, like to be pushed to the back burner and being over criminalized and underprotected. So with this particular report, one of the things that it does is it not only, right, like outlines very clear and direct things that we could do, but it also uplifts some demands, some policy interventions that have already been happening, right? The folks from Justice LA, have been uplifting, Care First, Jails Last, right, for a long time. And not only them, but the folks from Dignity Empower Now, the folks from Black Lives Matter Los Angeles, right, the folks from the Youth Justice Coalition, right, the work for investing in youth development and diversion, right, like for ensuring that we're actually investing in our young people and investing in their success and not in their incarceration. That has come from, organizations such as the Youth Justice Coalition, coalitions like the LA Youth Uprising Coalition, Social Justice Learning Institute, Brotherhood Crusade, right, like, these types of things have happened in our communities for a while. And I think it's important, that we not only, right, like provide policy interventions, but that we actually amplify what's already there. And the reason why I say amplify, right, and I want to make this clear, is because our communities have always fought back. our communities have always been working to transform our conditions. And now that we have continued to have this spotlight on racial justice, right? Like since George Floyd, right? Like I think we need to continue to uplift the narratives that have been happening on the ground. And I'm certainly excited about, you know, what this report can mean if people are interested in seriously investing, right, in racial justice. People are interested in helping to transform and end anti-Black racism, and to do so unapologetically. So that's definitely something I'm particularly excited about with this report.
Beautiful, beautiful. Sounds like powerful, powerful work. And I can tell you, being in those rooms, people who were doing the work were there as well. So when you go and look at this report, you're wondering, I don't know if so-and-so co-signs or endorses this. They probably was in the room. Let me just tell you, everybody who was, everybody who cared was up in the room, adding their voice and making sure we got this right, because it is a love letter. As Kamina said earlier, it is a love letter to Black Los Angeles. I know as you're listening, you're like, oh, I got some questions too. And I want to hear those questions as well. So the way you can do that is at the bottom of your screen. There's a question and answer little button there. You can put your questions in there and we will ask your questions to our esteemed panel as well. We want to make sure everybody's inclusive. In the Black community, we are a village. So it takes a village to understand and a village to move forward together. And so part of that village, though, is also that we elect people. All of us are out here grinding all our life. You be out here grinding, got multiple jobs. We don't got time to do every single thing. So we've elected some folks. We got some elected officials that we've elected from our community as well to represent us. And so, Emmanuel, I'm gonna start with you as the youth on the panel, and I'm gonna come around some of all of you all, I think, on this question as well. What do you want these elected officials, those who represent our village in seats of power, what do you want them to take from this report and to carry forth and to make happen?
For me, especially now that because I'm about to be voting age, thinking about like what I want from a candidate is something that I'm constantly thinking about. And for me, I think that candidates, they have to realize that they can't just go into situations and different issues in the community and just have a one-size-fit-all for everybody. We need equity in different situations. We can't just give everyone the same answer to the problem that we give. We can't just give out the same copy answer. And the main I have a kind of an analogy when it comes to equity. When it comes to especially the Black experience. For example, think of a race. You can give all the different participants of that race the same amount of time to get to the goal. But if you put one person all the way dead last, they're gonna have a different outcome in that race than someone who is forefront and right near the line. And so that's why I think equity is such a big thing, because you can't just give everyone the same exact amount of resources and not acknowledge history. Because you can give the kids the same amount of classwork time, but if that kid who is in the back is behind and doesn't know the material, has never seen the material before, he's not going to have the same results as the person who has known this material the back of their hand and has heard it their whole life. So equity is a big thing that I think that lawmakers need to politicians need to focus on and look at, because you can't just give everyone the same answer and be like, oh, we just want to give everyone the same thing to be equal. Because before you have equality, you have to have equity. Because you can't have equality if you just give everybody the same thing and you don't focus and hone in on the specific things that pertain to that specific group. It doesn't make sense. I've seen a different character, a picture, it was a father who's already tall. He could see over a fence to the baseball field. I've seen it in different classrooms, but it was these three people were watching a baseball game, and one of them was a father, and he already had 3 boxes. Another one was the first child. He was tall enough to see over the fence, and he got a box. But the child who couldn't see the fence at all got no boxes. He didn't watch the game at all, and that was an image to show equality. Everyone. They just got the box. Everyone has the opportunity to see over the fence, but they didn't get their needs met. But when everyone got the box because they needed it, not because they just all had the same opportunity, everyone was able to enjoy the game. I feel like I'm just rambling, but the main focus of what I'm trying to say is equity is a big thing that I need politicians to do, because you can't give everyone the same cut off, cookie dry, like cookie cut, like answer to their problems. You have to be specific and hone in on their problems, because the same problems that I'm going through as a Black man is not going to be the same problems as the white man in the corner in like West Hollywood. Another thing I think they need to do is prioritize the different problems of like of the LGBTQ community and different people like non-English speakers and different things like that. Because what they're going through is not going to be the same thing as like someone who's, for example, I'm a heterosexual man, but the same problems that I'm going through is going to be a lot different of that of someone who's homosexual, because they might face the same like racial problems that I face, but then they have the added homophobia and different things like that. So my main point for this whole thing is I think politicians need to look at different groups and see their specific problems, hone in on them, and not just, we're not saying that you have to be unfair to anyone, but hone in on the different groups' specific problems and answer them, and don't just give out the same cookie cutter answers to their problems.
Thank you, Emmanuel. Power to the people. You like Fred Hampton, you know, the chairman, giving us the truth. Reba, what would you say to elected officials from the report?
So, in the area of equity, you know, first I would want to acknowledge that there is a conversation that's happening. So there would be a thank you for having the conversation. And particularly many who have written reports or created a change in our county, our city, local city government. That would be one, but it's really about being creative, innovative, that we really have to think far outside of the box. And how do we do that? Well, we do that by not just reading the report, but asking questions to make certain that we are grasping what the meaning of that's written in this report. You know, all too often you'll find, at least in my experience has been, that sometimes people go along with or believe they truly are understanding what is being written and what needs to happen, and not. So I say be bold and be brave enough to ask questions, but also to help us along the way to move this. So it's really about being creative, being innovative, but also being unafraid to ask, to ensure that you understand. And that's what I would say. And what I would also say is this, that all of our elected officials, they are members of our community. And we have to take a real good look at what is going on outside. Now, I don't know where you live, but where I live, all I see are Black men who are outside, unsheltered. It's really important that we begin to take a look at what is in front of us. So in reference to this report, it's about action. It's about taking action, moving the ball.
That's amen from me. You had me thinking about Cornel West, who said, you cannot serve the people unless you love the people. You cannot love the people unless you know the people, right? And so that's what we want our politicians to do, our elected officials, to love all of us as well. Oh, I think it is the wrong thing. Anyway, let's go into the next question. Goes to Dr. Ange-Marie. How will any metrics of anti-Black racism demonstrate or showcase a change in persistent, pervasive barriers, especially in the safety system and youth development, are guided by a lack of diverse Black representation?
So this was one of the more exciting pieces, especially for, I will just call it, I am a geek. I am Dwayne Wayne from a different world. That is me. And I love data. And so one of the reasons why we made sure to have community accountability metrics is that we actually want to track the progress, right? So just what Ms. Reba was talking about a minute ago, that we want action, we actually defined what are the metrics that we're going to be looking at to make sure that there is movement, to make sure that there is progress, right? So when we think about those metrics that have to do with mass incarceration and police violence, for example, we want to look at those metrics. Once those Measure J allocations come down the line, we want to look at what are the arrests and the incarceration rates versus the diversion rates, right? Where are our Black youth? Where are our Black people actually going when it comes to some of these policy changes that have been put in place? So it's not just the fact of the policy victory, although that is always huge. And we always want to make sure that we are trying to have the policy victory in place. But what happens after the policy victory is equally important. And I'll give you, and Dr. David knows this one probably better than I do, but I'll just flag it. There was absolutely a push by the Brother Son Selves campaign to get things like the local control funding formula implemented at the school board level, right? And it was implemented. And then what happened? Everybody celebrated, everybody was excited. And then it came time, the money came down from Sacramento to actually dole out the money. And the board wanted to go back on its promise. And so if it had not been for active and engaged organizations who were right there with that metric to say, no, here's our metric right here. And this is how you're going to do this, because this is what you promised to do. Without that accountability, that would have gone on, and we would not have had the funding allocated properly to our schools and our communities and to our young people who desperately needed it. And so that's the piece of the accountability metrics that are really important, no matter which issue we're talking about.
That's such a good point around, metrics hold us accountable, right? And so, we see all these motions happening on the county level, on the city level, on the school board level, maybe even in your company, you've seen it happen, but without metrics, it's a lot of words, right? And so we got to hold people's feet to the fire and then grade each other. That's part of accountability, right? If you love me enough, you can tell me when I'm wrong, when I'm living up to the standard or to the standard or the metric that we've put in place to hold each other accountable and responsible to one another. We have a question from the audience. This question is from a brother named Carlos. And the question is, how do we disrupt gentrification? And I'm guessing that's going to Reba and then Ange-Marie. How do we disrupt gentrification?
I'm speechless, because it's happening all around us. But it's really about, investing in folks. It's about jobs. It's about ensuring that people are getting a fair living wage in order to survive and hold on to what they have. It's really, I'm going to back up from this question because I have a lot of things that I'm seeing in my mind right now. But I tell you that it's really about investment. It's about the wealth gap. It's about time. It's about time for change. And it's about owning it and acknowledging that it exists. So thank you for the question, Carlos. I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Alfaro, and she's going to help you. And then we got Dr. Turner in the house. So the doctors.
Well, I know that Ms. Reba has just as much wisdom, if not more, 90% of the time on these kinds of issues. But I will just add to what she's already said, because I agree with what she's already said about investment, is that we also need to make sure we have the right policies and protections in place, right? So we need to have policies and protections for tenants. We need to have certain kinds of zoning policies. So for example, I teach at USC. There was a building that went up. It was beautiful, affordable housing right on the corner of Exposition and Vermont. What ended up happening right next door is that a private entity then purchased the building next door, turned out over 100 families who had lived there for almost generations. And then what ended happening is that the actual houses that we were going to build that were going to increase the amount of affordable housing got balanced out by the number of people who were evicted in favor of student housing, because the thought is USC students will pay top dollar, right? So how do we fix those kinds of things from a zoning and a policy perspective are equally important, right? How do we make sure that perhaps there needs to be a cooling off period? So you have this major investment of affordable housing. Maybe there can't be that turning out within a 3 to 5 year period to ensure that people are able to stay in that neighborhood, right? Those are all kinds of creative policy solutions that we should be thinking about, because when we talk about putting things close to transit or making sure that people have jobs, if you don't have a place to stay, you're going to be commuting for God knows where. And the emptying out of Los Angeles of Black people is something that is a 30-year-old trend that we need to reverse.
David, I'm going to come to you on the same question, but on that point, Dr. Alfaro lifted up zoning, right? Zoning is a major way for it to disrupt gentrification. I know as a pastor in the community that we have lots of empty lots that we want to, if you live in South LA, newsflash, the biggest landowners are your Black churches, right? And we got lots of lots that we can build on, but they're not zoned correctly, right? And then we get someone down the street, they take, old house and they flip it into something else. And it's not zoned for that, but they built the density up. And that's changing our neighborhoods. And then Metro, right? Go to your Metro community meetings, right? Because the transit-oriented communities are supposed to keep the community there, not move you down the street. So go and raise your voice there as well. On this question of gentrification, Dr. Turner, the doctor in the house, you got any thoughts on that, brother?
Yeah, a few. So first of all, I definitely want to uplift the work of folks like the Labor Community Strategy Center and the Bus Riders Union. I think to that point, specifically about Metro, and helping to hold Metro accountable, right? Like, how we spending over $100 million on additional law enforcement on Metro, right? When people can't ride the bus for free. So again, right, I think just, even in our movability, right? Like our bodies are policed differently. First, I'll start off with a little bit of personal experience, right? Like my entire family at one point lived along Crenshaw Boulevard, right? I had an aunt that was off of 54th and Crenshaw, another aunt that was off 73rd and Crenshaw, another aunt that was off of 82nd and Crenshaw, right? And all the way down to like 117th, all along, from the Crenshaw district all the way through Inglewood. And now, right, like there are I have 3 cousins left who live in, the greater LA area, and everybody else is now living in Vegas, the Inland Empire, the Antelope Valley, or not in California, right? And that is not by mistake, that's by design, right? I think one of the challenges with the cost of living and being pushed out, right, is that if you can't keep up with housing costs, I think to Dr. Ange-Marie's point, right, like if we can't keep up with the cost of living, we can't afford to stay there, right, then we're not going to be there, right? So I think first and foremost, right, like affordable housing is absolutely critical. So like rent control, right? I think something blanket, some common sense sort of policy, right, and tenants' rights that I think is necessary. The Social Justice Learning Institute, alongside the Uplift Inglewood Coalition, right, here in Inglewood where I live, right, helped to pass rent control here in 2019. And because of that, right, our landlords haven't been wilding, like doubling people's rent in a matter of 2 months, right? So I'm definitely excited about that. I think another thing too, right, and this is one of the additional effects of gentrification, right, is that schools, especially public schools, the populations are starting to go down now, right? So, there was a new story that came out where the Crenshaw and Dorsey game had to get canceled because, there aren't enough players to start the game, right? Because there aren't enough students to go there, right? So I think one of the things that's vital, and also in order to, quite frankly, save public education, right, there needs to be investment in affordable housing. There needs to be investment, right, in ensuring that people can stay in their communities, because what happens is when you remove the communities, right, from where they're at, you also removing the community institutions, right? The institutions that have been there, that have that long memory of what's going on, right? So I think with that being said, affordable housing options, rent control, and in addition to that, right, wanted to uplift again that universal basic income, right, are some very direct and immediate things that we can do about gentrification.
Absolutely. And I'll say this about gentrification. Often when we think of gentrification, I know what came in a lot of people's mind was a person who didn't look like you with a dog walking across your lot. Let me just keep it 100 right here. But you know what? We can have Black Wall Street too, right? We could be the gentry to reinvest in our community. And that comes in philanthropy and business, and the government starts investing in Black LA, creating jobs, and we can retain the housing stock that we already have, right? And so next time your grandma says, she can't afford this house, instead of you selling the house, reinvest it as well back into Black LA. So along this question around housing, which is a major crisis, we know that there's only about 8% of LA City is Black, around 8 to 9% of LA County is Black, and that, we are living in a pandemic. The pandemic is still here. So, public service announcement, wear your mask and keep your mouth house. Right. And but David, I want to come back to you and others, if you can think about this as well. So we're in a pandemic. Federally, the eviction moratorium has expired. It's done. They said, look, we can't afford to keep doing this. California, you still got some more time. Also, if you didn't know, LA City just reopened up some of their housing relief situation. So what are we doing? What are we planning to do to help these families that are renting or purchasing property, make it easier? You got a house, maybe you can help me. Me and my wife trying to figure out, how can we afford a house? You working, 2 jobs, you can't 3 or 4 jobs, kind of figure it out. So what are we doing to help these families, and what can the report show us? And this is another plug, go read the report, because there's a whole housing section. Can't cover it all here, but David, I will come back to you.
Awesome. I definitely want to sort of underscore those zoning laws again, right? Because I think one of the things too, especially when thinking about, sort of unconventional housing, configurations, is right, like it needs to be easier for single or probably 2 property landlords, right, like to convert spaces into housing for people to have, right, like to have ADUs or accessory dwelling units, right, for people to be able to live there. I know, right, like in certain areas, right, like you can't raise a building over a certain foot, right, because if you could, right, then you could potentially add like a 2-story, apartment complex to the back of a regular sort of home that's somewhere in the avenues, right? Like, and that becomes a challenge, right? So I think first off, right, like for sure, is just being able to expand the types of housing that we have. I think another thing too is something that is very important when it comes to the conversation about homelessness, right? It's just a conversation about political will. When the pandemic first happened, and hotels were used as places, right, to ensure that people could safely social distance, could safely, right, like could safely sort of live and exist. I think, right, like it demonstrated to us that what we always knew could be done can be done, and quite frankly happened, right? So when we're spending $10 million for a raid of a homelessness encampment, or when we're spending like $8 million a day for LAPD, right, like to go out there and harass homeless folks, when we could be spending that money, right, to house people. We could be spending that money to ensure that people have access to the things that they need, right? Like we know, right, that there is another way. And not only do we know it because we know it because y'all did it already, right? So I think with that being said, one of the things to underscore is just ensuring that, the political will is there, right? And especially for our communities to continue to push, right? So that way we create the political will, because everybody knows homelessness is an issue. Everybody knows, right, that that is an issue here in Los Angeles. But again, right, like, are we going to have the will? Are we going to have the courage, right, to do what is right, and not just what's convenient? So with that being said, that would be my response.
So Pastor Eddie, I must touch on something that Dr. Turner made mention of, because I think that it's really important to know that it's a good thing that when we can, take hundreds of folks and place them into hotels or move them off the street. But it's also important for us to be educated and informed about what that looks like. So taking me off the street may not just be all that's necessary and needed, because it really depends upon what are you doing in order to support me with my trauma, to support me with my drug and alcohol addiction, to provide me with something that would give me some guardrails and some structure in my life that you can support and take an advantage of, so that when I am moved into your unit, for permanent housing, I'm not the same person that you pulled up off the street. And so I need to keep it really real, that the way the system is designed, is that it's not designed for us to actually grow. And so this is why I'm talking about being creative and innovative and ensuring that we are investing into the people, the heart and the soul of the individuals who we know are unsheltered. When we are helping them, what does help actually look? And is it helping?
Preach, sister, preach. We are continuing to talk about your No Going Back LA report. The path of justice is through equity. And we want you to hear from you. So please click into that question and answer and put your questions there for us, and let us know where you are on this report. So one thing that was very exciting for me on this report, as we were working on it, is that, we in Hollywood, so we had to ask the question, what does a Black Wakanda look like? What does that, what would that look like? What does that look like in Los Angeles on the West Coast? You may, on the East Coast, you may get that out of HBCU or, Atlanta or DC somewhere. But on the West Coast, if you want to make LA back that place where we were thriving and everyone has what they need, what that look like. And so we kind of touched on that a little bit on the report, but I wonder, are there some things that you noticed in the report that surprised you in some ways around, what is the vision for Los Angeles 10 years from now if philanthropy and government actually lean in? And I'm gonna start with Dr. Alfaro, because she helped put some of this together, and I'm gonna give you all some time to think about what may have surprised you in the report.
Oh, yes, that is absolutely. How do we create Wakanda on the West Coast is definitely one of the things that we talked about this past 6 months or so. I think the thing that surprised me the most was how much people really got that all of these issues have to move together, right? We can't just focus on housing without looking at economics and poverty relief, or we can't just look at housing, as Ms. Reba was telling us, without looking at physical health and mental well-being at the same time. And so just people really recognizing what they call the intersectionality of the issues, and I think Pastor Eddie, that's a term I heard you use during those meetings, was something that was really surprising, not in the sense of, oh, I never thought of that, but I was so glad that everybody agreed. Because again, we had people from all different sectors, but we also had people who focus on very specific issues, right? They focus on education or they focus on mass incarceration. And so for folks to be able to come together and to say, you know what, yes, my issue is important, but it can't exist or progress without these other issues also getting equal attention, was one of the best surprises of the report process.
Beautiful. And so Emmanuel, coming to you, hearing what Dr. Alfaro just said, what are you thinking about now? Like, what does the report mean for you and your activism for the next 10 years or in the future? How does this shape, and how does this give you a roadmap for how you should be moving?
Seeing this report, it just makes me really like glad that we're going in a positive direction. Like in 10 years time, I want to be able to look back and be able to say that, oh, I was a part of this moment that really helped change the landscape for Los Angeles. I've lived in Los Angeles my whole life and I've seen it go through so many changes. So seeing the report and seeing all the information that I can really agree with and seeing all, like even just hearing the conversations that we're having right now, just seeing the direction that we're going in, I'm really excited for the future. I want to be able to look down 10, I want to, like I said, I want to be able to look down 10 years down the line and just see like LA become something that's like that, become something, how would I describe it? Become something that I couldn't even aspire to see, something that like, if you told me today, I wouldn't believe it. I want to see an LA that is inclusive, an LA that is very goal oriented for everyone, not just one particular group, but goal oriented for everyone. Everyone is able to succeed. Everyone is able to like do and achieve their dream. So seeing this report and just seeing all the information in it has just got me really excited for the future, especially as a young man coming into like my adulthood and being able to do more in my community. I'm very excited.
Beautiful, brother. And Reba, I want to come to you. I want to have like a Sankofa moment. I know oftentimes you tell your story, you talk about the community that was here, right, when you were younger. And so we're looking forward. If that community came back tenfold, what would that look like using this report for Black Los Angeles?
Well, it would definitely look faith-based, that's for sure. And it would look like, folks caring about each other. And, oh my God, it just gets me excited. There's so much hope in this report because, as it stated, it's a roadmap, and if we could regain what we had lost when I was younger, and in particularly when I first became, unhoused, there were an array of resources that were available, and there was no complex that was designed specifically for those who experienced it. What it was it was our faith base that that opened doors and fed and clothed and housed. An amazing experience, but it was really more community oriented, and it felt good. And so I think that what's important for me in reading this report is the hope of feeling that again, that purpose, that it makes me emotional, because how oftentimes are we positioning ourselves to put something together that is for us, that is by us, produce something that's so meaningful and so purposeful? It gives me such hope. There was a time in which I had really lost it. So this report it's amazing, and I want to put emphasis on the roadmap. If we stay true to it, and we don't take our eye off prize, I believe that we can be all right.
If we keep our eyes on the prize, we're gonna be all right again. I love that. Manny, coming to you, talking about keeping your eyes on the prize. I know one thing that happened this past summer, what Student Deserve went up to LAUSD and was like, look, we can't get good education because y'all over here giving us random searches in the hallways. So we need to divest from that and reinvest in Black education. And so they've reinvested some dollars into LAUSD public education. What kind of partnerships do you think is needed for Black children to get a quality education in public school, or if the local charter school that's related to LAUSD? What do you think is needed?
What I think is needed is a type of education that is very much, that can reflect what these students are and who they are. Because I found, especially me, because I'm a Nigerian American, and I found myself, when I go and like look on history about like my Nigerian ancestry and like roots, I'm very like enamored by it. I'm very like invested. And that's why I've noticed the difference between me in US history class and me just going on the internet and looking up background on my own like family and like native ancestry. And I think that really like shows how how we need inclusive like education. I think the type of partnerships that we need is we need teachers who look like us. We need teachers who understand where we're coming from, teachers who can really like relate to the things that we're going to, the things that we are, and the people who we are. Sorry for that. But because I've noticed at my school, I have mostly like Black teachers. Like I think every single one of my teachers are Black. And when we have conversations and we have different discussions and things like that, you can really tell that it's not from a source of, oh, let me just get this job done. It's like they actually want to teach us because they see themselves in us and they can really relate where we're coming from. And they can really understand where we're coming from, especially when it comes to things like issues in school. Like one day a student might not be feeling good. And instead of our teachers just being like, oh, just go straight to the office, you don't want to hear you, they actually try to relate and see what they can do and what they can like, what type of help and what type of outreach they can do to make sure that student is feeling good because they've been in that situation and they understand that student. And especially because I've been in the Social Justice Learning Institute, and being in that class is amazing because I'm in the class with people who look like me. I have teachers who look like me and they understand where I'm coming from. And especially in that class, it's not, oh, I'm the teacher, just listen to whatever I say and I don't care about your opinion. It's more like, I understand that you have an opinion, you have your values, and I want to hear and understand where you're coming from. I want you to be enamored in this class. I want you to be enriched. I want you to be yourself and do your best in this class. I think partnerships with programs like SGLI or just different programs, or even Students Deserve, and hearing what students want and listening to their actual like backgrounds and not just seeing them as another number statistic. I think those type of things, those type of actions, those types of partnerships are really what we need in LAUSD.
Thank you for that, brother. What I'm hearing you saying is that we need to have culturally competent education, right? You said when the teachers understand you, they can care more and you can get more resources from the community. And so LAUSD, if you are watching, we need an assessment of curriculum, making sure it's culturally competent, that people can understand one another. David, Dr. Turner, we'll come back to you. So, during this Black Lives Matter protest during George Floyd, me and you were in the streets, brother. We was in there running from the LAPD because they were trying to shoot us up for just standing up for our rights and all that. So what's next, right? What's next for all of our comrades that were in the streets with us, walking through, Fairfax and walking through the neighborhoods, saying no justice, no peace, no racist police. What's next for all those who spent their time protesting now that we have all these policy decisions and roadmaps laid out before us?
Absolutely. So first of all, thank you for that question. And yeah, man, I'm realizing that, getting shot at ain't fun. It's not cool, right? So I definitely want to just say that, right? Especially there's, young folks watching this, right? But I think first and foremost, right, like it is get with an organization. The one thing about organizing, right, that makes organizing so distinct from just going to protest or just participating in an event, right, is that collectively we can do something that we could not do individually. I repeat that collectively we can do something that we could not do individually. This is why organizing works. This is why coalitions work, right? Like this is why these things work, because we're doing something together, right? So my first piece of advice for anybody who was out there who wants to do something is to get with an org, right? Now there is an org for everybody. I repeat, there is an org for everybody. If you're interested in immigrant justice and you identify as Black and LGBTQIA, there is an org for you. If you are a white person and you want to support Black folks, there is White People for Black Lives. That org is for you. If you are, right, a scholar and you want to do some work, right, there's not only Scholars for Black Lives, but there are a number of organizations looking for new board members. If you are a young person, right, and you want to transform, how schools are functioning in LAUSD, right, you have community coalitions, Students Deserve, SJLI, you've got the Strategy Center, you got Inner City Struggle. There are so many things, right, that you could potentially do. if, right, like you are interested in taking it a step further, right? So so this is where we talk about building power, and especially for those who are active, for those who are engaged, for those who want to do more. I guarantee you there's an organization who would love to have you there. And everybody don't gotta be on the front lines. I want to make that clear. Everybody don't gotta be, you know, out there at the action, right? Like we need some folks to make flyers. We need some folks, right, to help amplify the word. We need some folks to make phone calls, right? We need some folks to phone bank. We need some folks to call in to public comment, right? So that we can tell folks exactly what it is we want, right? Like we need people for everything, right? And I guarantee you that whatever skill, whatever talent you have, there is a role for you. So please get with an organization. I guarantee you, right, like, you know, you will be able to make that difference you seek.
Amen to that too. And if you're a spiritual person, there is a church, a mosque, a synagogue, a circle that's there for you. And if you at the place that they ain't talking about justice and equity, leave, find somewhere else. God can't be held to a box. Dr. Ange-Marie, another question that came from the audience is, did the community look at opportunities for labor and community organizing that will build political power? Are there industrial sectors where more resources for organizing by unions, alternative labor groups could result in more Black political power? So how is labor a part of this conversation?
Well, labor was absolutely a part of this conversation. Thank you very much for the question. In a couple of different ways. Certainly the representation on the Black Experience Action Team, you know, with April Ferret, but also Janelle Bailey of the LA Black Workers Center, who wasn't just a member of the team, but also did this fantastic presentation when we were talking about what quality jobs look like, but also how things like community benefits agreements and other kinds of things really need to be focused on making sure that those jobs go to people to preserve. So this is actually an anti-gentrification strategy as much as it is something else. So we definitely looked at that. The other thing that we looked at were, again, thinking about across the issues, how these different issues connect together, right? So we looked at how Black founders, right, might actually provide certain kinds of resources in addition to looking in specific sectors. We also looked at, from an innovation perspective, the kinds of things that are happening when you invest in, for example, Slauson Avenue, right? And make sure that there are not just, you know, investments in education, which is important, but there's also investments in green jobs, right? So there's a host of different ways that we looked at how they connected across the issues. To make sure that not only are workers not being discriminated against, that's the political and the legal question, but also making sure that as we make these investments, that Black people who are qualified for these jobs actually get access to these jobs, and networks and other things that sometimes lock out Black people are not the reason why Black people are not getting these jobs.
Beautiful. I heard hashtag invest in Black LA and hire a Black person today. Let's do that. How about that? We were talking about making sure we got labor at the table as well. And one of the reasons why that's important, right? Because when we organize and we fight, we win. We can't be minimized. Our voices can't be minimized. But in one way that we've seen this play out in our community, if you've been reading the Sentinel and other places, you saw right there on the front page, it had the Baldwin Hills Crenshaw Mall, and it had the word sold on top of it. And that hurt my heart a little bit, because I know that there have been people in the community who have been organizing. Baba Keelan and Damien and others have been organizing, raising money, real capital, to buy the mall back and keep it in the Black community, but it's been sold. And so the question that's come is, what are your thoughts around the recent purchase of the Baldwin Hills Crenshaw Mall, and how the Black bidders in downtown Crenshaw Rising were left out? Anyone want to take that on?
I could go. For me, like when I heard about it, I've only been there a few times. I'm not as close to the area, but for me, it was really heartbreaking, simply because Like you always hear, especially like when it comes to different conversations on like housing and different things, it's always like, oh, in America you have to fight, you have to work to be you have to, what's what I'm looking for? It's like we live in a capitalist society. You always have to like, oh, if you're not the best, you can't get mad that you don't get certain things. And in this situation, the people who were bidding, the community bid, and they had more money for that bid than the actual people who won it. And it's kind of crazy to see how usually in America it's always like, oh, you have to go to the top, you have to have the most money, this and the third, and we have all these rules and regulations. So, oh, if you want to succeed, you have to go have the highest paying job and this, that, and the third. But then when it came to the Black people, and when they had the most amount of money in the bid and they did all the requirements and they were the top ones, they still didn't care and would rather give it to someone else who wasn't Black. And it just kind of shows how even when Black people and like people of color in general, even when we appeal to the standards and the rules that are set before us, they'll still try and figure out some type of con and some type of like I was about to curse, my bad. They'll try and figure out some sneaky way to try and con us out of it. And it just really like it hurt me. And I've only been there once, but it was like just seeing how the community strived and they went and they did their absolute best and they had the best bid and they still weren't allowed to buy that area that meant so much to them. It just like it aggravated me because it's like they listened to the rules. They went and got the best bid. They had the most money, and it was like they went through and they did all the rules and regulations that were set out before them, and they still weren't able to do it. And it's like, and some people will argue, oh, it's not racially motivated, but how can it not be? Like they had the best bid, they did everything they needed to do, and they still didn't get it. And you want to tell me there wasn't no background like stuff going on? It just aggravated me. So I don't know. I'm pass it off to the next person.
I think you're speaking the frustration of a lot of people. And I'll just say, it's a setback, but a setback can sometimes be a delay, and it's a wake up that we can gotta start owning our own land and do community trust and getting creative around ways to make sure that happens in our neighborhood. So thank you for speaking the truth, brother Manny. So Dr. Ange-Marie, I want to come to you as one of the people who was helping write this report. I had to tell you a story. When I first became pastor of the historic McCarty Church, one of the elders said, baby, you need to learn about Black LA. And she pulled out this report. It was like 1980, I think, about the state of Black LA. And then I said, there's nothing new. And she was like, nah, this is it, baby. You need to read this about Black LA. And so the question that has been asked is LA breaking ground with this report? Do we know of any other city who has undertaken such a comprehensive process? And what was left out? What didn't make it in the report?
So I'll take on the first question that you said first, but I just want to amplify what you just mentioned because we do talk about it in the report. One of the pushbacks on things like what happened at the Baldwin Hills Crenshaw Mall is these community land trusts, right? When you own land in common, then it becomes much more difficult for someone to swoop in, right? And to kind of like just say, okay, we're just going to buy this up out of the community, right? So that is definitely one of the recommendations that we make, is making sure that these community land trusts, which are perfectly legal in the state of California and have been done in a variety of different cities, that needs to expand. We need to expand our use of things like that for exactly what just happened. So that's the first thing I wanted to say. Second thing, just to answer your question, is I want to draw just a slight distinction. So there have been, over the course of many, many decades here, and I think they would like to do another one, the Urban League in Los Angeles has done something called the State of Black Los Angeles. So that's probably the report that one of your elders came and brought to you from the 1980s. And what that report did was really share all of the data and the statistics about what's going on with Black Los Angeles, how many businesses, how many Black people, right? How many kids are graduated from high school and going to college, who's experiencing houselessness. So they were really like providing all of the data and a compendium of data. Our report is different. Our report uses that kind of data, but it actually charts a vision for the future. And I think the emphasis on how much attention we give to the future is distinct from what those traditional State of Black Los Angeles reports do. We need those State of Black Los Angeles reports, but what we really wanted to do was to look towards the future. And that, I do think, is distinct from what other cities have done, because other cities have taken one specific issue, right? So City of San Francisco has done a report on Black people experiencing homelessness. Los Angeles has done a report on Black people experiencing homelessness, right? But have they done a report that focuses across all 7 issues? What do we need to do within the next 10 years? And how are we going to hold ourselves accountable? That's always the missing piece. How are we going to hold ourselves accountable, right? We end up with what we think is a fairly unique effort. I don't want to claim that I've looked at every city in the United States, but I have not found a major city that has done this level of investment, to my knowledge. And again, I'm happy to be corrected if I'm wrong.
Right. Amen. So you said our report is distinct. It's trailblazing in some ways, but it also is building upon, right? And that's how we always got to look at it. We don't always need to create the wheel. We can build upon and stand on the shoulders that gone before us. This next question is interesting. So I'm going to actually ask it to Reba first and then come to you, David. Because I know, Reba, you fight this every day. You are advocating for Black people experiencing houselessness. And so the question is, how do we address the believability of Black racism when it is called out? How can stakeholders with a commitment to anti-Black racism mobilize and organize to ensure this becomes broadly ingrained in LA?
So my response to that would be to be informed. If I'm not actively listening, actively involved, attending spaces that are designed to serve the people, then I really may not be aware of what is all that is going on and all that it entails. And so I would encourage our community members to be involved, be in those places, wherever it is that you're desiring, and particularly around those who are unsheltered and systems that are designed to serve. That is really important that we take a look at who is at the table, who is making the decisions, and why aren't those who are either utilizing services or have utilized services not at the table. We're talking about people with lived expertise, to actually be able to see us in those roles. For me, I keep thinking about who is in charge of the entity that is designed to address homelessness. And they don't look like the people that are actually experiencing homelessness. And so this goes beyond. We really must show up and be actively involved and be informed. And so that's my response, is to be.
Dr. Turner, coming to you.
Awesome. I think the first part, right, is naming it what it is, right? Like, first and foremost, right, like it's frustrating, right? When we talk about I think things that are specifically anti-Black and then paint those broadly as just race issues, right? I think right, like the precision in naming something as anti-Black, right, like then allows us to create interventions around it, right? So I always like to say that, like, you can't have race specific outcomes without having race specific interventions. So first and foremost, right, like, we gotta call it what it is. Second, right, like when we start talking about the believability, right, of anti-Black racism when it's called out, we have never had a shortage of data, of information or stories around what's happening with Black people in Los Angeles or across the country, across the globe even, right? Like, I think one of the things that we have one of the things I think that, you know, we're able to do pretty well is elevate, right? Like, you know, the types of data, the types of information that comes out to let us know, right? Like, you know, what's really going on. I think the challenge is, right, like, one, are people going to believe it? And two, right, like, are we going to act on it, right? And I think one of the things that we need to continuously do, especially as folks who are on the ground and organizing, right, is stay in your face about it until, right, like until it becomes the happening thing to do. And I want to point real quick to a local campaign that did that, right? And that was the Jackie Lacey Must Go campaign, right? A lot of people didn't like that, right? A lot of people weren't necessarily on board, right, you know, with that campaign, right? But I think the work of impacted families, the work of Black Lives Matter LA to stay the course, right? You know, for years, to stay the course, be out there front of the Hall of Justice every Wednesday and pushing the line. Not only did it help to reshape the narrative, but it also helped to change what we do with electoral politics, right? And I want to say that to say this too, that sometimes anti-Black racism does come with a Black face. So with that being said, right, like, it's important, you know, for us as a community, for us as a whole, right, to stay the course. People aren't gonna rock with us sometimes. That's cool, right? Like, people aren't always going to be, you know, on board, right, with what's happening, right? Okay, but at the end of the day, what is best for the people who are impacted by the issues? What is best for our communities? What is best for us to ensure that we can get our work done? And then we invest in that, right? It won't always be popular, but I guarantee it will be necessary.
Wonderful. Swag right there. That's the truth. The truth will set you free. That's what the good book says. You just told the truth, brother. So thank you for doing that as well. I just also want to say, a part of the experience team, we talked about arts and culture, right? And we talked about anti-Blackness and how that shows up in arts and culture. People have taken so much of what we have created, our creative, you know, whether it's dance or music or even our paintings or murals, and you know, taking extracting from our communities. And so arts and culture is very much a part of this and anti-Blackness, and a discussion around how do we activate to make sure that our people are fully engaged. You know, we Black folks, so we got a little spice, a little rhythm, a little, you know, creativity inside of us. And so we want to make sure all of that is fully activated in the public square, right? And not used for someone else's gain, and bring that back to our community. So I know there's a lot of questions still left around the report. Please read it. Please do hashtags, tweet at us, hit us up on Instagram, Facebook. But last thoughts. And so I'm going to ask this question to all of you all, and maybe just one or two sentences, right? And you know, if I was, you know, back at Morehouse or at HBCU, we would say we did that. You know, we did that. We created a report. We showed everyone what we need, gave everyone a roadmap. You brought together the brilliant minds of Black leaders, organizations, community members. We did it for 6 months. We were focused, and we produced and birthed this in so many ways. And so now what? You know, so like, all right, cool. You did that, cool. They're gonna be on a shelf. They're gonna actually implement this stuff. So now what? So the main question for you all is, what's next for you with this Black report? What's next for you? How can we make sure that it stays uplifted and that it goes viral? Maybe not all around the world, but in LA, it goes viral among us as we are continuing to do this work. Let's go around. Let's go Reba, Dr. Ange-Marie, Emmanuel, and then David, last word.
Well, you know, for me, it's to continue the conversation and to continue to ask questions. This is really about accountability. And it's about having true conversations, continue to watch. You know, I think it was Dr. Turner who talked about staying that course. So we look at what's recently just happened at the city council. You know, so things are happening, but that's not enough. And so it's about holding myself as well as others accountable and paying attention, watching it and continuing to ask the important question. What are we doing? Where is it at? So that's my 2 cents, Arthur.
So thank you very much. And thanks to everybody. Thank you, Pastor Eddie, for this great conversation. I will say 2 bits of wisdom from our elders and then where we would like to go, or I would like to go. First, Frederick Douglass said it, power concedes nothing without a demand, never has and never will. W.B. Du Bois realized that if we spend our lives trying to convince white, brown, Asian, whoever, that anti-Black racism exists, right? We are in a losing battle. This is about power and building power. So you do not have to like me, you do not have to believe me, but you will respect me when I have the power. And so the thing that I plan on doing for the next 6 months, 6 years, 60 years, God willing, is to help supporting those on the front lines with the scholarship, with the data, with the analyses that I can bring to the table to actually move the needle so that this Wakanda on the West Coast that we're trying to build 10 years out, 25 years from out, my kids will see one day, your kids will see one day. And that is really the goal of this report, not for it to sit on a shelf. And we hope to have some community meetings. So if you sign up for us, join our mailing list, you'll be able to hear if we have additional community meetings by issue in partnership with some of these organizations we'd like to support.
Manny?
Yeah, so hearing her talk, she was talking about Frederick Douglass for a second. It reminded me of something I saw, and it was talking about how one of Frederick Douglass's one of his techniques is when he would talk about things like racism and slavery and things like that, he would talk and he would say something in a kind of a matter of factly type of way. That's from what I had watched. That's what they stated, that he had said it in a way that you couldn't question it, and he said it in a way that it was like a fact that we already knew. And so I think that when it comes to the future and future conversations, we shouldn't question ourselves with any of the information that we have. We should come boldly, and like previous people were talking about, we should come boldly and just come with our experiences and not be humble with it. Just because these are our experiences and no one else can tell us like what our experience is and all the different things that we lived through. So my last words are come boldly and speak loudly because you know your experiences and you know the facts.
Dr. Turner?
All right. Well, first of all, thank all of you so much for your words. Really want to give a big shout out, right, to Reba and Manny, especially, right, for bringing that community voice, to the table. And yeah, I think for this particular question, I think ongoing, right, the key is to remember that the work don't stop here, right? This thing that we've been fighting, right? This settler colonial white supremacist, like capitalist patriarchy wasn't built in a day. And because it wasn't built in a day, right, it was built over hundreds of years, right? Like, one report is not going to stop it, right? So for us, right, it's going to be the long game, the long-term engagement to make this happen, to make this a reality. And that part is not the sexy part, right? Like the sexy part is, delivering the speech on the steps in front of thousands of people, or, being in the streets with the signs, right? That's the sexy part. The part that's not so sexy is sitting with a family, right, who's been harmed by police violence, to actually listen to their story. Right. The part that's not so sexy, right, is when you've been in meeting after meeting after meeting, trying to figure out what the policy intervention or what the path forward is going to be. And it seems like people can't agree, but we still need to work towards something, right? The not so sexy part, right, is having to collect information, having to collect data, right, and having to survey hundreds of thousands of people to figure out, what their needs are, right? That part isn't always as sexy, but I'll tell you right now, like those are the things that are part of the building blocks for us building power. It is when we see each other. It is when we engage each other. It is when we work to build the power together, because collectively I see you as human, and we are going to do our work to fully realize our humanity. So with that being said, right, like we need to continue to engage each other. We need to continue to build power with one another, right? Like there are organizations within the Black Experience Action Team, right, who are working together collaboratively now, right, to push forward Black equity, right, for different initiatives already. So the more we continue to do that, the more we continue to see each other and engage each other, the closer I think we're going to get, right, to the vision for Black equity, for Black racial justice for all of us.
Thank you. And I want to thank each and every one of you for joining us for this community town hall. This is your city. This is your Black LA. So we invite you to join the conversation. Use the hashtag #InvestInBlackLA. Go read the report and then share it with somebody. As well, a Black proverb, it's all my life I had to fight. So continue the fight and know that God is using you, and Black love is opening up the doors for you to continue this fight as well. Y'all be good and peace.
And take the pledge.
Take the pledge. That's right. Take the pledge. We'll see y'all later.